The massive space station floated silently in the void, its crystal walls gleaming under the light of 3 distant suns. Inside the grand chamber, representatives from dozens of alien species had gathered for what they considered routine business. The air buzzed with electronic translations as creatures of all shapes and sizes discussed the day's agenda. Ambassador Park Hoon walked through the corridor leading to the main hall, his black diplomatic suit pristine and his expression calm. He carried a simple briefcase containing Earth's formal application for advanced trade status with the Galactic Council. This was humanity's chance to join the bigger community of spacefaring civilizations. The chamber itself was breathtaking. Towering pillars of living crystal reached toward a domed ceiling that displayed real-time images of space. Floating platforms held delegates from species that had mastered interstellar travel thousands of years before humans had even discovered fire. Some looked like giant insects, others resembled walking trees, and a few appeared to be made of pure energy contained in mechanical shells. As Park Hoon entered, conversations gradually died down. All eyes, sensors, and other perception organs turned toward the lone human. He had expected this attention, but the quality of it surprised him. Instead of curiosity or respect, he saw something else entirely in their alien faces and body language: amusement. The Zelathi delegate, a serpent-like creature with scales that shifted color based on emotion, was the first to speak. His tongue flicked out as he examined the documents on his floating display. "So these are the humans," he said, his voice carrying a tone that needed no translation. "The species that still burns chemical fuel to reach their own moon." Laughter rippled through the chamber, not the polite chuckling of diplomatic courtesy, but the genuine amusement of beings who found something genuinely funny. Park Hoon kept his face blank, though inside he felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. The Vorthak representative rose from her crystalline platform. Her body was made of what looked like living diamond, and when she was amused, patterns of light danced through her form like trapped lightning. Right now, she was practically glowing with entertainment. "I reviewed their military history," she announced to the chamber. "Their longest continuous conflict lasted barely 100 Earth years. We have diplomatic negotiations that run longer than their entire wars." More laughter. Park Hoon noticed that even the usually stoic Rillan ambassador was tapping his clawed fingers against his desk in what he recognized as their species' equivalent of chuckling. The Rillans were reptilian, covered in scales that reflected their mood through subtle color changes. Right now, those scales showed deep satisfaction. "Let me understand this correctly," the Rillan continued, consulting his own files. "They want to join our trade network, but their home planet still has over 200 separate political entities. They cannot even unite one small world, yet they want access to our galaxy-spanning commerce systems." The chamber erupted in what could only be described as alien belly laughs. Some species communicated their amusement through color changes, others through harmonic vibrations, and a few simply projected their entertainment directly into the minds of those around them. Park Hoon felt wave after wave of condescension washing over him. An insectoid delegate clicked his mandibles together rapidly. "Their fastest ships take months to travel between their nearest star systems. At that rate, a simple trade mission to the outer rim would take their entire species. Recorded history to complete. And their lifespan," added another voice from somewhere in the chamber. "Barely a century at most. They die before they can accumulate any real wisdom or experience. How can we do business with a species that replaces its leadership every few decades?" Park Hoon stood quietly in the center of it all, letting them have their fun. He had expected skepticism, perhaps some initial reluctance, but this level of mockery was something else entirely. These beings weren't just rejecting humanity's application, they were treating it as entertainment. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species had achieved faster-than-light travel when Earth's sun was still young, called for order. The laughter gradually subsided, though Park Hoon could still sense the amusement crackling through the chamber like static electricity. "We have reviewed humanity's application for advanced trade status," the speaker announced formally. "The key decision of this council is unanimous." He paused, and Park Hoon could feel the weight of dozens of alien gazes upon him. The application is denied. Park Hoon had expected this possibility, but what came next caught him completely off guard. Furthermore, the speaker continued, this council votes to implement immediate economic sanctions against human space. All trade with Earth and its colonies is hereby forbidden. Human vessels are banned from entering council-controlled space lanes. These measures are necessary to prevent the contamination of civilized galactic society with primitive and unstable influences. The word contamination hit Park Hoon like a physical blow. They weren't just rejecting humanity, they were treating humans like a disease that needed to be quarantined. Silence fell over the chamber as every being waited for the humans' response. Park Hoon knew that this moment would be remembered, studied, and discussed by both humans and aliens for generations to come. Whatever he said now would set the tone for humanity's relationship with the galaxy. He stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and gave a formal bow that was perfectly calculated, to show respect without subservience. When he spoke, his voice was clear, calm, and carried to every corner of the vast chamber. The Republic of Korea, representing the United Nations of Earth, acknowledges the wisdom of this council, he said in flawless galactic standard. We thank you for your clarity and will respect your decision completely. As he turned to leave, briefcase still in hand, Park Hoon allowed himself the smallest of smiles. None of the alien representatives noticed it, too busy congratulating themselves on maintaining their high standards of civilization. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Dr. Kira's scales shifted from their usual deep blue to an uncomfortable shade of yellow as she stared at the quantum communication display. The Rillan scientist had been monitoring galactic communications for over 3 decades, and in all that time she had never seen anything quite like this. The silence was absolute. Her workstation sat on the edge of council space, in a research facility that tracked all major communications across known civilization. Banks of sophisticated equipment hummed quietly around her, processing thousands of messages every second from hundreds of species. Trade negotiations, diplomatic exchanges, scientific collaborations, cultural transmissions, the normal chatter of a galaxy full of intelligent life. Except from one particular corner of space. 18 months ago, human communications had simply stopped. Not slowed down, not reduced to essential messages only, but completely and utterly ceased. It was as if someone had thrown a switch and turned off an entire species. Dr. Kira, her assistant called from across the lab. The young Rillan's scales showed the pale green of confusion. I've run the diagnostic 3 times. All our equipment is functioning perfectly. That's what I was afraid of, Dr. Kira muttered, her claws clicking nervously against her workstation. She pulled up the historical data, watching the patterns that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. For years before the Council's rejection, human space had buzzed with constant activity. Their primitive but enthusiastic communications networks carried everything from scientific research proposals to cultural exchange programs. Human diplomats had sent message after message, trying every possible angle to gain acceptance into galactic society. The humans had been persistent to the point of annoyance. Some council members had complained about the constant stream of requests, applications, and attempts at communication. Ambassador Park Hoon and his team had worked tirelessly, submitting proposal after proposal, trying to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. Then came the Council's decision. The rejection, the sanctions, the declaration that human space was off limits. Dr. Kira remembered feeling uncomfortable during that session, watching the other species laugh and mock these newcomers. Something about their cruelty had bothered her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why at the time. The last official human communication had come from Ambassador Li Wu, Park Hoon's replacement. His message had been brief, formal, and strangely final. Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for this clarity regarding our status. We understand your position completely and will no longer burden you with our presence. We wish all Council species prosperity in their endeavors. After that, nothing. Dr. Kira had expected anger, protests, desperate appeals for reconsideration. She had seen it before when species were rejected by the Council, Most spent decades trying to prove themselves worthy, sending increasingly frantic messages, making grand gestures, sometimes even resorting to threats or attempted demonstrations of power. But the humans had simply vanished from the galactic conversation as if they had never existed. "It's not natural," she said to her assistant, her scales now shifting to the deep purple of genuine worry. "When species go quiet, there's always a reason. War, plague, natural disaster, economic collapse. Something always shows up in the energy signatures." She pulled up the long-range sensor data from human space. This was where things got truly strange. The energy readings were off the charts. Where 18 months ago human space had shown the typical patterns of a developing civilization, scattered industrial centers, growing but modest energy consumption, the gradual expansion of infrastructure, now the readings looked like nothing she had ever seen. Entire star systems were showing energy outputs that rivaled the industrial centers of ancient council worlds. Resource extraction signatures indicated mining operations on a scale that should have been impossible for a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel a few centuries ago. "Look at this," she called her assistant over, pointing to the display. "This reading is from the Sol system, their home territory. 6 months ago, their energy output was typical for a Class 4 civilization. Now it's showing levels that would make them a Class 7, maybe even Class 8. Her assistant's scales went pale with shock. "That's impossible. Civilizations don't advance that quickly. It takes millennia to move up even one classification level." Dr. Kira nodded grimly. "And look at these mining signatures. They're not just extracting resources from planets anymore. These readings suggest they're processing entire asteroid belts, maybe even dismantling small moons. The scale is incredible." But it wasn't just the industrial activity that worried her. There was something else in the readings. Something that made her evolutionary instincts scream warnings she didn't fully understand. The energy patterns were too organized, too coordinated. Instead of the chaotic signatures typical of rapid industrial expansion, human space showed signs of perfect synchronization. Every system, every operation, every construction project seemed to be working together like parts of a single, vast machine. "They're building something," she whispered to herself. "But what?" Her assistant was studying the data with growing alarm. "Dr. Kira, some of these energy signatures, they don't match any known technology in the Council databases. Whatever they're doing, they're not using our methods." That was perhaps the most unsettling part of all. The Galactic Council represented the accumulated knowledge of dozens of species, each contributing their own discoveries and innovations to the common pool of galactic technology. The idea that a single, supposedly primitive species could develop entirely new approaches was almost unthinkable. Almost Dr. Kira had studied human history during the period when they were actively seeking council membership. What she had found had surprised her. Humans had a pattern of innovation that was unlike any other species she had encountered. Where most civilizations built upon existing knowledge, gradually improving and refining established technologies, humans seemed to leap directly to entirely new approaches. They called it thinking outside the box, and it appeared to be a fundamental part of their nature. Across the galaxy, other council species were celebrating what they saw as a successful quarantine. The dangerous, unpredictable humans had been contained, their influence prevented from contaminating civilized galactic society. Trade flowed smoothly along established routes. Diplomatic relations continued their ancient patterns, and the natural order of things remained undisturbed. But Dr. Kira stared at her readings and felt a growing sense of unease that she couldn't shake. Something was happening in human space, something unprecedented and potentially universe-changing. The silence wasn't submission. It was the quiet of intense, focused work. She had the terrible feeling that when the humans finally broke their silence, the galaxy would never be the same again. The question wasn't whether they would emerge from their isolation, but what they would be when they did. Dr. Kira hadn't slept properly in weeks. Her scales had turned a sickly grey color that worried her colleagues, but she couldn't tear herself away from the monitoring station. What she was seeing defied everything she thought she knew about how civilizations developed. The numbers on her screen kept climbing to impossible levels. 2 full years had passed since humanity's last official communication with the Galactic Council. 2 years of absolute silence from a species that had once sent dozens of messages every day. At first, the other council members had been pleased with themselves. The quarantine was working perfectly. The humans had accepted their place and retreated into their small corner of the galaxy. But Dr. Kira's secret monitoring equipment told a very different story. She had modified her sensors months ago, pushing them far beyond their official capabilities. What she discovered made her question whether she was losing her mind. The energy readings from human space weren't just unusual, they were impossible according to every law of physics the Council understood. "Computer, show me the resource extraction data from the Tau Ceti system," she commanded, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. The holographic display materialized above her desk, showing a 3-dimensional map of a star system that had once been a modest human colony. What she saw made her stomach lurch with disbelief. The asteroid belt was gone, not mined out gradually over centuries, as would be normal, but completely harvested in a matter of months. The readings showed that every piece of rock, every particle of metal, every trace of useful material had been systematically collected and processed. It was as if someone had taken a giant vacuum cleaner to an entire star system. "How?" she whispered to the empty lab. "How is this even possible?" Her equipment showed similar patterns throughout human territory. The Sol system, humanity's birthplace, had been transformed beyond recognition. Mars showed signs of complete atmospheric engineering. The gas giants had massive industrial complexes wrapped around them like metal skin. Even the sun itself showed artificial structures in its outer corona, somehow harvesting stellar energy on a scale that should have been fantasy. But it wasn't just the scale of construction that terrified her. It was the speed. Civilizations typically took thousands of years to develop the technology for large-scale space engineering. The Council's most advanced species had needed millennia to build their greatest achievements, yet humans seemed to be accomplishing in months what should have taken centuries. Dr. Kira pulled up the energy signature analysis, her claws trembling as she accessed the classified data. What she found there made her scales shift to the deep black of pure terror. The humans weren't just using advanced technology. They were using technology that didn't exist in any council database, energy patterns that followed rules she didn't recognize, construction methods that seemed to bend the fundamental laws of physics. "They're not hiding," she said aloud, the words echoing in her empty laboratory. "They're growing." Far away, in the deepest reaches of human space, where no council sensors could penetrate, Captain Kim Do stood on the bridge of a ship that would have been incomprehensible to any non-human observer. The vessel existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its hull shifting between states of matter as it moved through space-time. Kim Do had once been a simple cargo pilot, running supplies between Earth's outer colonies. She remembered the day humanity's application to the Galactic Council had been rejected. She remembered the humiliation, the laughter, the casual dismissal of her entire species as primitive and worthless. That memory fueled everything she did now. Around her, holographic displays showed the progress of construction projects that spanned dozens of star systems, massive foundries that could disassemble planets and rebuild them as perfectly engineered worlds, shipyards that turned raw stellar material into vessels that existed in dimensions the Council couldn't even detect, research stations where human scientists had broken through barriers that had limited galactic civilization for millions of years. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying across quantum communication channels that connected every human outpost across their rapidly expanding territory. "Kepler sector reports completion of the 7th planetary reconstruction," came a reply from Commander Park Min, overseeing operations 3 star systems away. "We're ahead of schedule. The new world will be ready for colonization within 2 months. "Excellent. What about the dark matter harvesting operation?" "Beyond our wildest projections, Captain. We're collecting enough exotic matter to power our expansion for the next decade. The Council species have been ignoring these resources for millennia because they lack the technology to safely extract them." Kim Do smiled, remembering the Vorthak representatives' mocking laughter about human technological limitations. If only they could see what humanity had accomplished in just 2 years of focused development. And the Dimensional Gateway Project? Dr. Lee. So reports successful testing of instantaneous transportation across galactic distances. We can now move resources and personnel between any of our territories in seconds rather than months. The captain nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. Every breakthrough, every achievement, every impossible accomplishment was proof that the Council had made the greatest mistake in galactic history. Remember what they called us, she broadcast to the thousands of humans working across their new empire. Her words reached construction crews reshaping dead worlds into gardens, scientists unlocking the secrets of reality itself, and engineers building wonders that made the Council's greatest achievements look like children's toys. Remember how they laughed when we asked to join their little club. Remember how they treated us like a disease that needed to be quarantined. Remember their faces when they called us too primitive, too violent, too short-lived to matter. She paused, looking out at the impossible vista of human achievement surrounding her ship. Artificial worlds glowed like jewels against the darkness of space. Massive structures harvested energy from stars themselves. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions carried the hopes and dreams of humanity to corners of the galaxy the Council had never even explored. And remember that they gave us exactly what we needed, she continued, her voice carrying across the quantum network to every human ear. They gave us solitude. They gave us freedom from their limitations, their rules, their small-minded thinking. They tried to keep us contained, but instead they freed us to become what we were always meant to be. The construction continued, the expansion accelerated, and in the darkness between stars, humanity built something that would soon make the Galactic Council's mighty civilization look like a quaint, historical curiosity. They had no idea what was coming. The emergency alarms screaming throughout the Council monitoring station had never sounded quite like this before, high-pitched, urgent, and somehow wrong in a way that made every technician's skin crawl. Senior Officer Vextar rushed to the main display, his tentacles moving frantically across the control panels as he tried to understand what his instruments were telling him. "Sir," called his junior operator, her voice shaking with confusion, "we have a contact at grid reference 77 Alpha, but the readings don't make sense." Vexitar's 3 eyes focused on the display, and what he saw there made him question whether his equipment had finally broken down. The ship appeared as a shifting blur on their screens, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent, sometimes seeming to exist in multiple locations at once. "Run a full diagnostic," he ordered. But even as he spoke, he knew the equipment was working perfectly. This was something else entirely. The vessel itself defied every principle of spacecraft design known to galactic civilization. It had no clear hull, no obvious propulsion system, no recognizable energy signature. Instead, it seemed to bend space around itself, creating distortions that made nearby stars appear to ripple like water. Then it spoke. "Council Monitoring Station, Outpost 7, this is Admiral Song Hai of the Terran Sovereignty. We are transmitting notice of expanded territorial boundaries as required by galactic law." The transmission came through perfectly clear, but somehow bypassed every single security protocol and encryption system the Council had developed over thousands of years. It arrived directly on the main command channel, as if their most advanced defensive systems simply didn't exist. Vextar felt his heart begin beating irregularly. Terran, that meant human. But humans had been silent for 3 years, dismissed and quarantined like a minor inconvenience. How could they possibly have technology that made Council systems look primitive? "Sir," his operator whispered, staring at her console in disbelief. "They're transmitting a data package. It's downloading itself directly into our secure networks. I can't stop it." The information that flooded their systems rewrote everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. Star maps showing territories that stretched across regions of space the humans had never even been allowed to visit. Industrial signatures that dwarfed anything in Council records. Population centers that shouldn't have been possible. Within minutes, the data had propagated throughout the entire Council communication network. Every government, every military command, Every scientific institution in galactic civilization suddenly found themselves staring at proof that the universe had fundamentally changed while they weren't paying attention. In the Grand Council chamber, emergency sessions were called as representatives from dozens of species gathered in growing panic. The holographic displays showed Admiral Songhai's ship holding position just outside their territorial boundaries, neither threatening nor retreating, simply existing in a way that challenged their understanding of physics. The Vorthak representative, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy, was the first to find her voice. This cannot be accurate. Humans were barely capable of interstellar flight 3 years ago. These readings suggest they control more territory than our entire council combined. Admiral Songhai appeared on the main communication screen, her image crystal clear despite the impossible technology that surrounded her ship. She was younger than many had expected, perhaps in her 30s by human standards, with calm, dark eyes and an expression that revealed nothing of her thoughts. "The data is completely accurate," she replied, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. "The Terran sovereignty now encompasses 47 star systems, 31 of which we constructed ourselves over the past 18 months. Silence fell over the assembly like a physical weight. Constructed star systems. The concept was so far beyond council capabilities that many representatives couldn't even process the words. The Rillan ambassador, his scales shifting through colors, that indicated severe emotional distress, leaned forward in his chair. "Constructed? You're claiming to have built entire solar systems?" "Correct. We found that natural stellar formations were inefficient for our needs, so we developed methods to engineer systems from base matter. Each of our constructed systems produces approximately 10 times the usable energy and resources of naturally occurring ones." Admiral Song gestured, and the holographic display changed to show detailed images of what she was describing. Stars that burned with perfect efficiency, surrounded by rings of perfectly positioned worlds, planets with engineered climates, artificial gravity wells that held massive orbital structures, and energy collection systems that harvested power directly from stellar cores. It was beautiful, terrifying, and completely impossible, according to everything the Council thought they knew about the universe. How? The word came from the Xialathi delegate, though he seemed to surprise himself by speaking aloud. "How could you advance so far so quickly?" For the first time, Admiral Song smiled slightly. "You isolated us. You declared human space off-limits and cut us off from all contact with galactic civilization. You gave us 3 years of perfect solitude, free from distractions, free from the need to conform to your expectations or follow your technological pathways." She paused, letting the implications sink in. For 3 years, every human scientist, engineer, and innovator worked with a single focus, proving that your dismissal of our species was the greatest mistake in galactic history. We didn't waste time trying to copy your technology or follow your established methods. Instead, we started from first principles and built something entirely new. The chamber buzzed with translations as representatives whispered frantically among themselves. Some species were calculating the military implications, others the economic ramifications, and a few were simply trying to process the reality that their understanding of technological advancement had been completely wrong. "How you must understand," Admiral Song continued, her voice never rising above a conversational tone, "we harbor no ill will toward the Council. Your rejection was actually a gift, though you didn't intend it as such. You freed us from the limitations of your established systems and gave us the motivation to exceed every boundary you believed was fixed." The Council speaker, ancient and wise, finally found his voice. "What do you want from us?" Admiral Song's expression didn't change. "Nothing. We're simply providing the required notification of territorial expansion as specified in galactic law. The Terran sovereignty has no interest in joining the Galactic Council, engaging in your trade networks, or participating in your political systems." The implications of her words hit the assembly like a shockwave. Humanity wasn't asking for acceptance anymore. They had grown beyond the need for council approval, beyond the desire for membership in galactic civilization. They had become something else entirely. "We've built something better," Admiral Song concluded simply. "Thank you for forcing us to find our own way." As her image faded from the screens and her impossible ship departed council space, the representatives sat in stunned silence, finally, understanding that the galaxy's balance of power had shifted forever. The humans weren't coming back to ask for acceptance. They no longer needed it. The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago. But everything else had changed completely. The same floating platforms held the same species representatives, the same holographic displays showed star maps of known space, and the same ancient protocols governed the formal proceedings. But the human standing in the center of the chamber was nothing like the desperate applicant who had once begged for acceptance. Ambassador Park Jun wore a simple black uniform that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No medals, no decorations, no symbols of rank or authority. He didn't need them. The quiet confidence in his posture and the calm certainty in his eyes spoke louder than any ceremonial display could have managed. The assembled representatives watched him with a mixture of fear, awe, and barely contained panic. Word of humanity's transformation had spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Stories of constructed star systems, impossible technologies, and achievements that redefined what civilization could accomplish. Many had dismissed these reports as exaggerated rumors, but the evidence was undeniable. Humanity had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Honored representatives, Park Jun began, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber without any apparent amplification. The Terran sovereignty acknowledges the Galactic Council's historical role in maintaining order among the species of this galaxy. He paused, letting his words settle. Unlike his predecessor years ago, he wasn't asking for permission to speak or seeking validation for his presence. He was simply stating facts. We extend this invitation once, and only once, to each member species individually. You may apply for associate membership in the Terran Sovereignty Alliance. We offer complete technology sharing, unlimited resource allocation, and protection under our aegis for any species that chooses to join us. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations as translation devices worked overtime to convey the implications of his words. The humans weren't asking to join the council anymore. They were offering membership in something bigger. The Zealathi delegate, his serpentine form coiled tightly with nervous energy, was the first to respond. Gone was the mocking arrogance he had displayed 3 years earlier. His tongue flicked out nervously as he spoke. And what would be required of species that accept this invitation? Park Jun's expression remained neutral. Nothing beyond what you already do. Peaceful coexistence, open scientific collaboration, and mutual respect. We have no interest in changing your cultures, your governments, or your ways of life. We simply offer you the chance to benefit from technologies that will improve the lives of your people. The Vorthak representative, her crystalline form dim with uncertainty, leaned forward on her platform. What if we refuse? What are the consequences of declining your offer? For the first time since entering the chamber, Park Jun smiled slightly. It wasn't threatening or mocking, just genuinely amused. Then you continue exactly as you are. We have no interest in conquest, domination, or forced compliance. We've built something better than what you once offered us, and we're simply sharing that opportunity with others. High above in the observation deck, Dr. Kira watched the proceedings with a sense of profound satisfaction. The Rillan scientist now wore the silver insignia of a Terran science advisor, a position she had accepted gladly after humanity had approached her months earlier. She had been among the first non-humans to truly understand what humanity was becoming, and they had welcomed her insights with open arms. Working alongside human researchers had been the most intellectually stimulating experience of her long career. Their approach to science was unlike anything she had encountered, combining creative leaps with rigorous methodology in ways that produced breakthrough after breakthrough. The projects she had access to now made her previous work for the Council seem primitive by comparison. Dimensional engineering, matter reconstruction, stellar manipulation, consciousness transfer technology that existed only in theoretical discussions among Council species had become routine tools in human space. Down in the main chamber, the Council Members were whispering frantically among themselves. She could see the calculations happening in real time as they tried to process the new reality. The humans now controlled more territory than the entire Galactic Council combined. Their industrial capacity outproduced all Council species together. Their technological advancement had leaped centuries ahead of established galactic civilization. Most importantly, they had achieved all of this in just 3 years of isolation. The Rillan ambassador, his scales shifting through nervous color patterns, voiced what everyone was thinking. How do we know this isn't some elaborate form of conquest? History shows that powerful species eventually seek to dominate weaker ones. Park Jun nodded thoughtfully as if the question was perfectly reasonable. A fair concern, but consider this. If we wanted to conquer or control you, would we be here talking? Our technology is centuries ahead of yours. We could have simply taken whatever we wanted without asking permission or offering partnership. He gestured toward the holographic displays showing the galaxy's current political map. Instead, we built our own civilization, solved our own problems, and achieved our own goals without taking anything from anyone. We're offering to share our success because we believe the galaxy is better when all species have the opportunity to thrive. The ancient council speaker, who had presided over humanity's original rejection, finally found his voice. What assurance do we have that humanity won't eventually use this technology against us? The same assurance you gave us 3 years ago, Park Jun replied calmly. None. The difference is that we've already proven we can succeed without your help, approval, or participation. We're offering partnership to those who want it and peaceful coexistence to those who don't. He began to turn toward the chamber's exit, then paused and looked back at the assembled representatives. We learned something valuable from our last interaction with this council. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is to get out of their way and let them discover what they're truly capable of achieving. His words carried a weight that silenced the entire chamber. Every representative present remembered the mockery, the laughter, the casual dismissal of humanity as too primitive to matter. They had tried to keep humanity contained, small, and irrelevant. Instead, they had accidentally freed them to become giants. The choice is yours, Park Jun concluded. Individual species may send representatives to our embassy stations if they wish to learn more. We'll be here when you're ready. As he walked calmly from the chamber, the council representatives sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that they were no longer looking at applicants seeking their approval. They were looking at the new center of galactic power, one that had grown far beyond any need for their recognition or acceptance. The humans had taken every insult, every rejection, every moment of mockery, and transformed it into motivation for achievement that redefined what was possible. In their arrogance, the Council had tried to maintain their position at the top of galactic civilization. Instead, they had created their own replacement. Now they would have to decide whether to join this new order or watch from the sidelines, as the galaxy moved forward without them. The age of the Galactic Council's dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun.